Okay. Now, Ethan, why did you raise so much money to help your friend read?
Mm, yeah, I think there have been a few inflection points in my life around reading. Um, the first one I remember being that third grade student who hadn't learned to read yet, and I would get pulled out of class, and just the psychological impact, right, of knowing that you're different than those other students, of struggling. I went through K-12 with undiagnosed dyslexia, and I continued to struggle with reading, with writing, um, and and with feeling different than the other students. And I know fundamentally, right, when we're talking about reading, when we're talking about the classroom, so much of it is confidence based. It is psychological. And it's not just about reading, it's being able to participate and thinking of yourself as a learner. And so for me, I was very fortunate that I went through K-12 and had a tremendous turnaround with a couple of teachers who leaned into me in middle school and high school, and I got a full scholarship to Harvard, but I saw other folks who were very close to me and struggling not graduate from high school. And it's not because they're not smart. It's not because they're not hardworking. There was just this barrier there. They didn't follow the traditional expected path of shifting from learning to read to reading to learn. And so they missed all of the other knowledge and skill building that comes out of that. And that's a problem that I felt like AI is actually super ready to solve, right? Because what AI is actually really good at right now, and it's not good at a lot of things, but it's really good at communicating, and synthesizing and simplifying and translating and adapting content to a variety of contexts so that every learner, every reader, um, can can truly understand what's happening. And that's what I think we need to change, right? Like the book has been static. Our notion of a book, even before like Gutenberg, right? We have this long-standing history of the book being this monolithic thing that you write it once, and those words are true, and it is static. Um, the press just reinforced that further. But actually, when we're talking about a book, when we're talking about any of this stuff, right, like we have the craft, the skills around writing, the language itself, and then we have the ideas, the meaning behind the work. And when I'm trying to teach you something, right, like I don't need to stick to some dogmatic, specific set of language. I can adapt that to be relevant to you, to make sure that it works for you. And we should have that same thing for books, where we're able to get those ideas across, um, in many different ways, without losing the intent and meaning that the author had.
Right. So you have a vision for transformative communication. You just started
Absolutely.
you started to articulate. Let's get to that. But before
Yeah.
we do, talk to me about this friend. They're essentially a jump off point. Who is it? What's their name? Why is this person important to you? And then what was the jump off point?
So it's
You just
actually it's two family members,
okay.
and I watched them struggle through school. I watched them um, miss that learning curve, and then watching them not graduate, and they have had incredibly difficult lives, right? That have been so different from my own. And I've continued to reflect on, you know, if just a couple of things had gone differently, if I hadn't had those teachers who leaned in at the right time. Uh,
Why do you think you had it and they didn't?
that's a great question. I think one thing, um, my maternal grandmother really supported me during a few of those years. And she was a bridge. Like she also, she and my step grandfather really taught me how to put myself out there and to attract the kind of help that I needed. And that's a funny skill, to put yourself out there. Um,
Right.
but again, I think there. so many students who go through K-12, right? Like these teachers, they'll have 120, 150 students at a time, and they can only really lean in on a few of those. I had a teacher in high school who brought me home every Friday night and made me dinner. And I don't think you're allowed to do that anymore, but it was so impactful and so meaningful to have an adult there who really supported me unapologetically, and saw that I had the potential to do something and learn something. Um, and that's an incredibly powerful thing to have.
So you had a maternal bridge that showed you it was a numbers game.
Yeah.
How come that didn't stick with your two other family members who are sort of built the same way in sense of their cognitive ability? Like you know, what happened there?
Yeah, I don't know that they had that person. They didn't have that person to lean in to them. And there's so much research out there, right, that shows that having someone who really believes in you like that one adult, can make a profound difference, in your outcomes. But it's something that I've continued to reflect on for a really long time now. And it was what kept dragging me back towards education again and again, because these are actually really intelligent people that we're talking about here. Um, it's not a capacity issue by any stretch of the imagination. And I hear this again and again talking to educators and talking to parents, right? Um, it's not a capacity gap so often. It's a skills gap, and reading is a skill. And so often I think we make this mistake of tying reading skills to intelligence, so often, and that becomes hyper internalized. It was internalized for me at one point, right? Like I can't read, I can't spell. Um, it's a reflection on my intelligence rather than a skill that I need to develop, or rather than a skill that dyslexia makes more difficult for me to develop. Um,
And this awareness that you've had of your two colleagues and yourself, did that happen after you went through the whole cycle? You know, you graduated at Harvard and you're like, actually, what the hell? Or did it happen in the moment? Were you aware at the time it was happening?
I wasn't. I really wasn't aware at the time it was happening.
When did you
Um,
become aware?
I I remember getting to Harvard and, just seeing this opportunity gap that was all around me as well, um, and how different the lives of so many of my sort of fellow students were. I think a big one for me was actually, right after I graduated, and was working on my first startup. I tutored kids, and these parents would pay me $100 an hour to help their kid go from getting a 22 on the ACT to getting a 34, right? Which is the difference between, not getting into a really selective college and having the numbers to get into a Harvard. Um, and I was like, wow, like I never had any of that. And this sort of recognition that there was this massive support gap, and that helped me sort of reflect that, hey, it's not the fault of these individuals with this capacity without the support, that they it's not a matter of grit or resilience. It's a matter, which are important to a certain extent, but it's a matter of, what opportunities did you have, what supports did you have to get you there. um, and that's been a huge driver for me.
So you went through it as someone that's different. You put yourself out there, but you had people see your talent. You then got through one of the strictest paths that you can get through to one of the highest levels.
Yeah.
And then you came back and realized that there's like a whole army of people getting people through those places. And you sort of had an army, but you didn't really have one. Why did you choose to become a tutor and not a why did you Why did you choose to become a tutor versus have people over for dinner? Like, why didn't you just apply what worked for you? What made you jump into the system?
That's a good question. I think uh, part of it was very practical, right? It was a way to support myself while I was trying to build this other thing. And so, um, and I had proven that I could get those scores. And actually, I love teaching, I love learning. And so there was something really natural there. Um, but it just showed, it was so eye-opening. Like I remember getting into college freshman year and all of these kids around me, they'd already published their book or, they had their patent in or whatever it was. And I was like, wow, I don't have any of that. I've never had some fancy internship or any of these other things. Um, and I felt a sense of sort of inferiority around that until I recognized all of the opportunities that I hadn't had and all of the supports that I hadn't had.
So you're saying that with less support, after experiencing the support, you got conviction or self-belief? Like, what did it give you? What if you had to name the realization, how would you name it? Okay. Is it confidence? Is it conviction? Is it self-belief? Or is it, you know, courage? Like, what is it?
Um, I think it comes with a belief in my own resilience. It comes with a belief, certainly in hard work. Um, but for me, it's also, I think, come with a lot of humility because I can look back and see these inflection points like that teacher who took me home for those dinners or my grandmother or any of these other steps. I can look back and see, maybe I didn't have somebody paying $100 an hour to tutor me, but I did have a few people who leaned in at just the right time that made that massive difference between me and these family members, right? And so there's a humility there. It wasn't just like a bootstraps type of situation. I mean, I worked really hard, and I have a sense of confidence from that, definitely, but also a recognition that's really humbling that I could have also been the kid who didn't graduate from high school like very easily. Um, and things
Let's
had
so
gone.
up until that point, did you see what the journey was handed to you as just your openness to experience driving it? You know, or was it just these people were providing you safety, so you just lent in? You know,
Yeah, that's a
or did you put yourself out there and they just caught you because you were taught to put yourself out there?
I think I was taught to put myself out there. I think I also had a hunger in this sort of small community, especially as I started to recognize my own LGBTQ identity.
Sure.
Um, there was a real hunger to whatever it took, especially in high school, find a way. I had no idea that full scholarships were a thing, which sounds crazy, right? I remember spending 4 hours every Sunday, my junior and senior year, applying to scholarships, scholarship after scholarship after scholarship, because I had this drive. I was like, I need to get in somewhere and I need to find a way to finance this and I need to find a way to get out of this community where I don't know another person like me. And and so there was a driver there, but the foundation for the success that I had with that was those people that chose to lean in.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you often fail to recognize your hunger as one of your core
Um,
successful traits?
I mean, I'm definitely hungry. I love building. I love making. Um,
That's a
and
big shift, though.
you
Yeah.
think so?
Yeah, you got all these
Yeah,
different things happening,
yeah,
trying to figure out your identity. Don't fit in to a small village, for want of a better word. The small village has no knowledge of the system, even though it's interconnected. The system isn't your friend. You work that out. You become this sort of sales guy by seeing these opportunities and putting yourself out there and then closing them and then moving on them. That only comes from the hunger.
yeah.
Do you often, do you recognize that you have that?
I don't think that I had ever put it in terms like that before. Um,
Why not?
um, that's a great question. I think I tend to think of it instead of hunger as drive, which I know can kind of almost seem synonymous, but has a different sort of flavor. Um, I love building things. I love making things. Um, I was actually a studio art major, believe it or not, and I studied art history as an undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
How I fell into that is a whole other story, but I just love making things and bringing something new into the world and the skill set to execute on that, and bring something to life. And I found as part of this journey or early on in this journey that there was such a creativity to tech and entrepreneurship and building. And so I just like intrinsically have this drive, or you can say hunger. I want to make something new in the world. And I want to make something that I believe in. Um, and that's a really powerful, I guess it is a hunger. I don't think it's a hunger.
I'm just using your words. You described it as a hunger, by the way.
Did I? Did
Yes.
I? Yeah,
You watch this back, you'll see yourself say it. Yeah.
that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess it was a hunger um to get out of this place and see a bigger world.
Mm-hmm.
And became this drive to build and create, and to build the skills within myself to be able to do that.
Right. So you have this knowledge that you're different on multiple levels. You realize that there's a path to a different type of world. You're spending every junior, senior year trying to get to this path, through this bridge skill that you've been taught by your grandmother. Is there a maternal being in your life that you've then exposed, and you're putting yourself out there as many times as you can. You know, um, I can't wonder as you go through this, how did you deal with that many layers of rejection, and
Um,
what did that do to you?
yeah.
A lot of different sort of side quests to get to the goal, and it's the same sort of thing. Got to keep putting yourself out there. got to keep knowing that you're different. Got to keep doing through the things in the hard way. Although you've got advocates, yeah, but it's still hard for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you deal with the rejection?
It's so hard. It's so hard. But I think one of my closest friends, actually several of them have said that I'm the most resilient person
Sure.
they know. And part of that comes from, um, having had a lot of that rejection in childhood and having missing a lot of supports around me and sort of instability around that time, and going through that rejection cycle again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and having those other challenges. But I guess it was countered by a hunger, in a
Nice.
way, or drive. And like if you learn that, I feel bad in some ways for the kids who get to college and have never faced that rejection or failure. Because it's a really difficult thing to learn.
Mm. And then how did you feel when you eventually got accepted? What happened? What happened in that moment when you realized that beaten probably the
Yeah.
biggest video game boss that you could beat? That's pretty much what Harvard selection process is. So,
Yeah.
how did it feel?
I was just relieved.
Relief.
I was so relieved.
What were you relieved? You could have a break. You're
You
tired.
know, I very naively thought that I had made it,
Hmm.
which I unlearned very quickly when I got to school, because there was such class stratification. I remember
What do you
a
mean? What does that
professor,
mean?
yeah, there was a lot of segmentation along. I
Really?
I remember so many students, like many times, they would say something like, "Oh, so you're like a scholarship kid, right?"
Hmm.
I remember a professor, a BU professor, but a professor that I met. Um, and we were having this great conversation, and he was asking all of these probing questions that I came to notice, like, what's your favorite country? What countries are you traveling to this summer? Or these kind of obnoxious signals. Um, and when I shared that I was a first generation college student, which I kind of had a point of pride in. He was like, well, it's impossible to make it in the first generation, to make real wealth and to do really well. And that was like that he had leaned in and had this like interest, and he was incredibly engaged. And that was the end of the conversation for him, which was just like this really, really eye-opening thing for me that
Wow.
I watched all of these people around me. I remember not knowing that I had to apply for summer internships so early. So here it was like, you know, April or May of my freshman year, and I'm scrambling to apply for things. And everyone else knew that, that whole process happened long before then. There were all of these moments, and they had this very clear path laid out for them. Um, of how to navigate that system, of how to get support from professors, office hours. I didn't know office hours were a thing. Like nobody, you don't get told how to use these resources. You have to figure all of that out. And there are so
Especially if
many
you're
like,
first to go through it.
yeah. Um,
So you get relief, then you start realizing that these people aren't it's not the liberal heaven of learning, so to speak, for want of a better word.
yeah.
And you realize that the game is still to be played. How did you respond?
I think I spent a lot of my undergraduate career trying to pass as someone who had come from an affluent background. Um, No, it's true. It's true.
Pounce.
Like
So you're using the hunter terms again. You realize that right away.
to
Pounce.
pass.
I thought you said pounce. You said,
No, no, to pass, to pass.
right.
So, having the clothes, being able to
Oh,
share.
so you tried to hide in the masses of the rich.
I did. I did.
How'd
And I
that
got
go?
really good at it.
Huh.
Um, I did get really good at it. And I didn't see, I stopped seeing coming from a non-privileged background as a strength. I stopped seeing overcoming that undiagnosed dyslexia as a strength. I just started seeing all of these things as weaknesses um, to hide.
Right. So you avoided your hero's journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
You
good way to put it.
rejected the call. Huh?
Yeah,
Okay. So you've gone through this process, become an art history major. You know, what turned the hunger back on? Why you with the hunger again? You've not enjoying you're accepted the hero's journey now, from what I can see. You know,
yeah.
you're not letting this class structure change the way you think about it. You've got this vision, you're not letting anyone really touch it. So what happened? How did that guy that was Like shit, that professor just absolutely destroyed me for no reason. I want to join that group of people. Like, how does that guy go back to the Ethan we know today?
Yeah, I think our dreams and our vision for ourselves change so often. There was a big point in my undergraduate experience where I wanted to be a museum curator. I wanted to be able to create and tell this story in this way about this thing that I was really passionate about, that I thought brought a lot of value into the world. And um, I remember I had a mentor who had gone through my program who was a senior curator, like the head curator at an iconic museum. And she worked with me for quite a while, and she sat down with me one day. She said, Ethan, if there's anything else you can do, if there's anything else you can do it.
Jesus Christ.
And it was so funny,
Wow.
right? Because I was like a full
What a terrible
full
thing to say to a young person.
No, I'm so grateful for it. I'm like incredibly deeply grateful for it. I had worked really hard. I had gotten all of these awards and internships, and I was an alternate for the Berlin Fulbright to go do this massive research project that would have set me up for my PhD and everything. Um, but then she was like, the average curator in the United States makes like $38,000 a year. That's less than at the time an Uber driver.
Right.
Right? Like you have to come from resources
Right. Yeah.
in order to do that. And that was just like such a turning point in my journey. Um, these several turning points in my journey when I think about resources, when I think about the options that I had open to me, and I became very disillusioned
Yeah.
with
I can imagine.
yeah.
Mm.
And then I stumbled into entrepreneurship through some friends who um, and I saw an opportunity to still make things, to still be creative, to keep building and to apply this really diverse set of skills that I had learned almost by happenstance through these like different difficult phases to try and
No happenstance.
build something unique. And
Well,
it
through
seemed like,
sounds like you learned them through your resilience.
yeah, maybe. I, for sure. Um, and so it just seemed like, hey, all of these other careers, these tracks that I had looked at, I didn't feel I kind of bought into what that the professor said, that I couldn't make it in that first generation. And entrepreneurship, I was told, was one place that I could break those rules, um, and build something really meaningful. Um, and like it was my drive. Um, that could propel that forward, and my creativity to sort of make something happen.
Right.
And that felt really exciting and liberating.
So you had like this build up of skills,
Yeah,
and then you realize, holy shit, I've got my own tools. I don't need the tools of the system. I can build my own system.
yeah.
Now, I have to ask, are you doing all of this so you can feel like you're a member of their class?
I think at one point, yeah, I was. Um, and it's really hard to see in my dorm, right? In college, I have classmates who have been New York Times bestsellers and won Pulitzers, and my German tutor, gosh, what was it? She won, like, she was a Nobel nominee, right? Just like these incredible accomplishments, and folks who went off to found um, massive, massive companies. And certainly, is there a point of comparison there? There definitely was, and it was very constant. And there was a striving to prove to myself and to other folks that I could do it, and a striving to prove that I wasn't just a diversity applicant, um, which was something that was tinged in those comments, right? Being a scholarship kid, um, oh, you're a diversity hire, so to speak. Um, and so something definitely drove me there in the same way it drove me to try and cover up that background and the challenges that I had faced. I wanted to prove to myself and to other people um, that I could do it. And that's a powerful thing.
And is that still rearing its head? Is it still holding you back? Is it still burdening you?
No,
Or what
it's like, it's really not.
that's very wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
Mm.
It took a long time to sort of escape that. Um, but I don't feel like I need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Um,
Wow. And how has that helped you become a better founder?
Great question. I think that there's a belief in myself there. I think when I was out fundraising, actually, for this one,
Cool.
um,
Good.
instead of trying to convince every investor I met of me and my vision and this journey ahead of us, I had a confidence in that, and I changed my perception from going out to convince to going out to um, evaluate and disqualify and find people who were attuned to what I was building and really cared about it and were ready to be along that journey, and a confidence there where I didn't feel like it wasn't about those rejections, and there were a lot of rejections early on. I'm incredibly happy with the set of investors that we've gotten, who are almost all strategic, really high value operators in the space that are bringing so much to the table beyond the capital that they brought in. But it was a whole shift in mindset to not take those rejections personally anymore. It wasn't a reflection on me. And instead, um, to have a confidence there and to be looking for the right partners.
Yeah. Right. And as you fragment that part of yourself, you know, the the sort of insecure guy that's trying to fit in with people, although his best strength is putting himself out there as himself, which is such an interesting juxtaposition. But it makes sense because you can get tired, right? I don't want to keep trying to fit in if I'm different, you know, or I need to fit in because I'm sick of being different. Like it's this constant question. And as you look forward at your trajectory, as a founder and entrepreneur, are you concerned about that character coming back? And if you are, where do you think it could appear?
That's a really great question. I think that there's always that sort of um, you never fully escape that insecurity or that comparison to others. It's always lurking there a little bit, at least for me. I don't see a world where it's ever totally, completely vanquished, but I also have such a firm grounding outside of that. Um, and I also have a confidence now that I've been through this a couple of times and I've been around the entrepreneurship, wagon, that you get so much better at it every time. You're building a set of skills, and I have more reps in me, but I also have a really clear confidence and the resilience to bring something into the world and make it successful.
Right. Okay. And do you think when the time comes, and the world before you're ready, which is always what's going to happen. Are you going to be ready to accept that you have to move from the humble knight that does things differently to the king that's composed, that needs to lead his village to the next location? You think you're ready for that?
I don't think that there needs to be that binary. I kind
Oh,
of reject that binary a little bit.
that's the knight in you. That's humble.
Yeah, I think you can maintain that humility
You could
and
be a humble
also,
king, no
yeah,
dramas. But
exude.
are you ready to bring these people up? Are you ready to accept the role of safety for those that don't fit in?
Hmm,
Or do you
I think
think
I
that you'll
am.
be more comfortable in just letting people become their own knights?
I think there's a really important role in nurturing that.
Okay.
Um, but I've also become increasingly comfortable. Actually, a big part of this adaptive reader journey that I've been on has been coming to terms with being more public about
Hmm.
the struggles that I've had of my hero's journey, as you put it. I had never really talked about that publicly before this, of seeing that as a strength, of seeing it
What's
as an
happened when you
asset.
start talking about it? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the small group of people that I had told about this in the past, whether it's professors or mentors or whatever, and shared a little bit about my hero's journey, I had always like felt like those were the only people who understood me and knew me, and really understood what I brought to the table. Um, and now um, it was so painful and uncomfortable to start peeling back those layers and exposing them because there's a vulnerability there. And I had gone through that journey of judgments and rejections based on those through my college experience. But now, putting it out there, I feel a real strength from it, and a recognition of the strength it takes to get where I am in spite of. And I think there's also a real power, and I've heard this, anecdotally many times of folks who have come to me and said, I heard your story and I I told my sister-in-law who has kids who are dyslexic, or it's changed the way I perceive people who are different in their capabilities and capacity. And that's a really powerful thing.
And I can tell you how I felt when you told me.
Yeah.
It made me feel safe, and then I could see immediately how I could help you.
Mm,
So how does that change your sort of thought about why you're worried about being vulnerable? When you made a guy like me, who is, some would say, a very intimidating character, feel safe immediately.
um, I think in my sort of counterpart's journey,
Mm.
um, I'm starting to recognize the importance, like that's a foundational layer. Like your counterpart needs to feel that safety. You often need to take that first step of vulnerability. Um,
Yeah.
and it does leave you exposed and it does open you to rejection, and you will still get rejections, and you need to be prepared for that. There are still people like that BU professor out there. And I'll encounter that. But um, I've gotten so much value, both intrinsic sort of personal value, and also value in having that vulnerability and sharing that story, being able to um, build stronger connections with folks like yourself who have brought so much to the table to help me with adaptive reader, that value so far outweighs those moments of rejection that can come with that vulnerability.
Yeah. I just saw you as a leader
Mm,
and the one that I would trust and follow, which is rare for me because I don't follow the common, because I've seen what common leaders do to uncommon men and women in uncommon circumstances, and it's never a good result.
Thank you, Tom. That really means a lot.
So as we go on this journey, we've got this art history major, and then we have this museum curator, and now we have this product leader getting built out. The one thing I would be thinking if I was a listener right now is, how are you making AI beautiful to
Yeah.
people that know every tool they've been given doesn't work for them? I'd love to sort of end on this question.
It's a great question. I think, having struggled so much myself along the way, it's given me a really deep um, empathy for, I have folks in my direct family as well with autism and Down syndrome, and I've seen those things played out, right? And so now I see this power. So much of the sort of chatter around AI has been around chatbots and these little wow factors. But where I see tremendous potential is actually something much simpler and much more concrete, right? The capacity for us to take that AI out of the cloud in a way and do something totally, utterly pragmatic with it. Of being able to take novels and textbooks and these other long form pieces of content and be able to transform them to make sure that every person is able to comprehend the content contained within, regardless of how we need to share that story with them. And so we've used AI to build this tooling where we can change the reading difficulty level of these texts. We can translate them into multiple languages, and then we can take that output and we can manifest it either as an audiobook that sounds like a real person for students who struggle. We can make it in a digital format where the student can see it side by side in English in their home language, or we can manifest it as a physical book. And I think that's the product, but the vision here is really to make books as dynamic as the web. This idea that we can make them adaptive. This dream that you should be able to order a book with Pashto on one side and fifth grade English on the other, and layer in dyslexia formatting, and be able to listen to that read aloud in either language, right? Like the book doesn't need to be this static, concrete thing anymore. We can escape that and actually transform it into something that can be just right for that reader to make sure that they're able to fully access the wealth of opportunity that's out there.
Mm. Pragmatism, dynamism, adaptiveness. I think for me, the adaptive comprehension um, is the beauty right now. And I say that, and a lot of people ask me, how does a dyslexic person get good at speed reading? And I say, you get good at speed reading by not reading the page how it's designed again and again and again, because you can't comprehend what's going on the page. You actually have to go through it a lot of times. I don't know about you, that's what I had to do, like a lot. Same page. I had to go back and reread it until I could comprehend it. And I think about the person going through that problem, and I imagine if I could use your tool and read it at the different levels of comprehension, my experience would have been completely different. One of the reasons why I learned to love books was because my grandfather would discuss with me the book as if we had a book club with me and my uncle. There's one part of that that was like propaganda for me to join the army, and we only read military books. But there was another part of it that they were explaining it to me and the things that I'd
Yeah,
missed. And, I can't help but wonder that if I had your tool, that would have gone from frustration and more of a participant in that conversation than an observer. And to me, the beauty comes from the freedom to how the learner can now interact with the people around them. That's the thing I see as unique.
absolutely. And
Yeah. And I love that it makes people uncomfortable. I
yeah,
love that the comprehension grading that you have makes people uncomfortable because that means they're not dyslexic. They don't understand how valuable that is. It's not dumbing down the text, it's breaking it down so the person can then unlock the text. And I think that's the nuance that only someone like you could understand.
absolutely. And it
And
stretches,
beauty's hard to look at.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
It stretches beyond just that dyslexia as well. Like we had a school system in South Dakota come to us and want us to translate text into Lakota, right? There's so many, there's 7,500 languages out there. And for all of those languages, there are dialects, right? Like you say somebody speaks Chinese. Well, if they're in Beijing and speaking Mandarin, they can't have a conversation with someone in Guangzhou speaking Cantonese. Like those dialects are too far apart. And so the idea that AI can get us to the point where we can make a book that is in Spain Spanish versus Mexico Spanish so that we can take away this constant translation layer that is on these readers' minds, right? Where they're having to adapt in their heads content to that's not just right for them.
Right. Yes, no, you're allowing people to connect and communicate without changing who they are. And it's almost like that is the glory or the holy grail that you were looking for your whole journey as you went from trying to communicate to changing who you are to coming back to who you are and then trying to communicate as you went through different levels of life. Do you have anything that you'd like to say that's been left unsaid?
I think thank you. I just want to thank you for being along this journey. It's been a short time now, but even conversations like this are really powerful and forcing me to reframe the points in the journey that I've been along and to give me the strength to sort of to push forward in this counterpart journey of bringing this out there and bringing it into the world.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's easy. Very, very lucky and we're very grateful to do that. Everyone, this is Ethan. He's an uncommon man. He's someone that we would follow. And if he follows that hunger, I think a lot of things are going to change. So don't forget your hunger, mate.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom.
Cool.